Russian gas. The U.S. and the U.K. and NATO wanted the EU member states to sanction Russian gas, both because it would cripple Russia's economy and also, so there's a national security element here. Now we get to take over Africa. Now we get to take over Central Asia because there's no Russian resistance from the military because they're bankrupt. Now we can beat back Russian influence into Central and Eastern Europe because they're bankrupt. It's the same way we won the Cold War. The Soviet Union collapsed because it was bankrupt. So they embarked on a diplomatic quest to get all these countries to pass sanctions on Russia, but they couldn't do the full sanctions in 2006. So they embarked on what they called energy diversification. Then the 2014 fiasco pops off in Ukraine, and this becomes existential because now half of Ukraine is effectively militarily backstopped by Russia. So they have to get Europe to pass these sanctions on Russia. But the issue is a lot of these EU member states did not want to have to buy super expensive Western LNG. It would be ideal if you could simply harvest the endogenous gas supplies in Ukraine. Ukraine happens to sit on Europe's third largest unexploited natural gas resources, or the shale that can be converted. And so Burisma was a tool to be able to supplement the Western LNG with an endogenous and at-home Ukrainian alternative gas supply so that the sanctions could go through in Europe and so that Ukraine would not be reliant on Russia to have cheap natural gas. But this required Naftogaz, the state-owned Ukrainian gas company, which George Soros has been locked in a power struggle with Putin over privatization for decades. And Burisma was the largest of the private for-profit firms that had the rights, the gas rights for exploitation of eastern Ukraine and the surrounding Crimea offshore gas supplies. And so Burisma was seen as an instrument of statecraft by the U.S. State Department to economically bankrupt Russia and to militarily shut down Russia's war machine as part of the larger play for Naftogaz and to build up Ukraine's innate gas supplies, which were underexploited, in part because of a military tension over who actually controls that territory. That's why the Donbass is so important. That's why after the counter coup, the U.S. was sponsoring this is what the military the military assistance impeachment of Trump was about in 2019. We weren't at war with Russia then, right? This is 2019. This is 3 years before the outbreak. We were sponsoring the military reconquest of that region because that's where the energy resources are. The population's mostly in the West. The resources are mostly in the East. It's the same thing with China and Xinjiang in terms of that dichotomy. And so this is, when Hunter Biden said, when he was asked what he was doing on Burisma and whether he felt shame about it, he said he was doing a patriotic duty for his country. Burisma was an instrument of statecraft for the State Department. What they were doing is they were building that up. That's why they had funding from U.S. aid. Again, the CIA funding conduit was working with the Atlantic Council with 7 CIA directors on board. Hunter Biden's on the chairman's advisory board of the NDI. Hunter Biden's law firm even this just broke 4 months ago. Hunter Biden's law firm actually had wrote a pitch to the U.S. State Department for how Burisma could serve as as basically a vassal for U.S. State Department interests in the region. You had Burisma's back channeling with the U.S. ambassador in Rome on similar grounds in terms of the Italy-Greece supplies. But what you have here is a private sector for-profit company. Many such cases, by the way, because not only was Hunter Biden on the board of Burisma as chairman's advisory board of the CIA's DNC cutout, but who else was on the board of directors right next to Hunter Biden? Cofer Black. Cofer Black, who spent 30 years in the CIA, won CIA Distinguished Medals Awards. You can read the Daily Beast article where Cofer Black is described as Mitt Romney's Sherpa to the intelligence community to get the CIA's blessing to back him against Barack Obama. What is this CIA luminary doing on the board of Burisma? What is Hunter Biden, who the CIA personally calls the Justice Department off investigating his funding sources and is on the chairman's advisory board of the CIA cutout? It's because, just like we have done since the 1940s, it is a dual use entity. It's a for-profit standalone private sector firm, but it's also an instrument of statecraft because every dollar that Burisma generates is one less dollar that Gazprom generates. And so it's the best job in the world if you can get it. It's you get to keep all the profits, and you are getting the backing of the battering ram of the blob. And remember, we personally intervened. It was Joe Biden at the Council on Foreign Relations who bragged about using the diplomatic carrots and sticks of the U.S. empire, that if Ukraine wanted their $1 billion in assistance, they had to fire the prosecutor who was investigating Burisma. Nobody in our Congress, I think, is prepared if there was a total declassification of all CIA and State Department cables and documents and meeting minutes and emails and communications. If you had for all intelligence work related to Burisma, the treasure map that would break open, I think, would frankly be a diplomatic scandal, because this gets to the larger play around the IMF and its play to privatize Naftagaz, because there's something very nasty here, which is that we have been trying to get, just like we put Russia through shock therapy when we won the Cold War, and then it was the Harvard endowment and the Soros crew and the U.S. State Department who privatized trillions of dollars of state-owned wealth by the Soviet Union so that they could become a capitalist society, but then the assets are held by Wall Street in London. This has been the play with Ukraine. They know the potential of the entire European energy market running through Ukraine if they can just get it up and running. So this grand Ukraine energy play has been to privatize Naftagaz, the feeder that Burisma feeds into, so that you have Western stakeholders who make the money by capturing that market, have the blob, the State Department, the CIA, and the DOD impose enough pressure to carve Russia out of the market. Now you've got private sector stakeholders who are basically early stage equity holders in a totally protected, because it's protected by the bayonet of the Pentagon, the State Department, and the IC to make sure that the profits run through there so that Russia doesn't get it. So it's a great job if you can get it.
Jesus Christ.